And this is Seattle's Morning News. In British Columbia, discoveries of unmarked graves at former so-called residential schools for Indigenous children have shaken Canada and brought about new scrutiny to these decades-old reports of missing and abused children. There are parallels on this side of the border, too, and our resident historian Felix Bunnell is here with that part of the story. Felix is brought to us by Lake Washington Windows and Doors. Felix?
Yeah, this is a complex story about generational trauma, and it requires sensitivity. In the time we have this morning, we can really just scratch the surface. In late May, the Kamloops Indian Band in British Columbia announced they discovered the unmarked graves of 215 children on the grounds of the old Kamloops Indian Residential School. That was operated from 1890 to 1978. It's a horrific discovery. It's traumatized people and shaken Canadian culture and society to the core. It appears to be forcing a reckoning between Indigenous people and everyone else. Other unmarked graves have been discovered in Canada, including on Penellicut Island near the San Juans just a few days ago. Now, these residential schools in Canada were government-funded and often run by religious organizations, including the Catholic Church. Many people believe they were part of a systematic effort to wipe out Indigenous culture. Kill the Indian and save the man is the old saying. Separate kids from their families, their language, their spiritual practices. There are also places where physical and sexual abuse clearly happened and where countless Indigenous kids just went missing. Now, it's being taken very seriously in Canada. The government there has set up a trauma hotline. The media coverage is intense. This past Canada Day, that's their national holiday, it was on July 1st, was somber this year. There were Indigenous demonstrations. The country seems to have lost its taste for celebrations. It seems like there's a reckoning at hand in Canada. Now, a similar system of schools existed in the United States, including here in Washington. Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland, who's the first Indigenous person to hold that job, announced in late June the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, which is described as a comprehensive review of the troubled legacy of federal boarding school policies. Now, my sense, and I'm not alone in this, is that we're headed for a similar reckoning on this side of the border. I reached out to Michael Finley. He's a former tribal chair, and he's historian for the Colville tribe. He said the stories of abused and missing kids and the true intent of Indian schools are common knowledge in tribal communities.
It's a very traumatizing era in our history that isn't well known to the general public, but it should be. But it's only finds like this where people finally start to pay attention to what we've always been saying. And so our voices have been muted by a lot of different efforts. But this is a very systematic, a very deliberate attempt to wipe us off the map.
Like many Indigenous people, Michael speaks from personal knowledge. His father attended the Pascal Sherman Indian School in Omak. He was sexually abused there by a priest. He witnessed violent abuse of other students. One of his great aunts has shared stories of when her sister was sent to Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania.
And she talked about her older sister that got sent off to Carlisle when she was younger. And they didn't hear for weeks that she had died. And the only answer they got when they said that she died way over at Carlisle was that, she took a shower, she put her head out the window to talk to somebody from her dorm room, and it was midwinter, and she caught pneumonia and died. And there was no more answer than that. But she talked about the pain of that.
Michael Finley says family histories like this are the rule, not the exception.
There's many stories like this that are painful, and they run through our generations today through their historical trauma that a lot of people don't want to recognize or talk about. But it's very real, and I guarantee you if it happened in any other scenario, it would be headlines everywhere. But for some reason, because it happened to Native people, nobody wants to give it the same level of credence that they would otherwise. And I hate to say it that way, but it's true. And we're the survivors of that historic trauma, but we're here to tell the story, and we're not going anywhere.
I also spoke with Shelley Boyd. She's Michael Finley's cousin. She coordinates a legal effort related to traditional lands in Canada. Now, that Colville Reservation in north central Washington is separated from other Indigenous groups by the international border. But people like Michael Finley and Shelley Boyd, who live there, they're geographically and culturally close to the people who attended that school in Kamloops.
The message that I feel that we have had generationally was that either that didn't happen or you're exaggerating it, or I think of it in terms of even our, as Sinixt people, our connection to Kamloops is that the territory right next to our territory in Canada. And I 100% believe that some of our people are part of those unmarked graves, right? And there's no finding out who they are.
Yeah, I reached out to the Department of Interior to find out what's next for Secretary Haaland's initiative. You know, there's records to comb through at places like the National Archives at Sandpoint. There's families to talk to gather personal stories, perhaps even archaeological field work like what's happening in Canada. Nobody really knows for sure. I also spoke with Craig Bill. He's executive director of Jay Inslee's Governor's Commission on Indian Affairs. He told me there were 13 federal Indian boarding schools in Washington. The biggest ones on the west side of the mountains were Tulalip near Marysville and Cushman near Tacoma. There are also a number of day schools. I'm not sure how many. There is no one place where all this information has been gathered yet. I asked Michael Finley what people in the Puget Sound area, maybe hearing the story, who think they have no personal connection to Indigenous people, what they can do. He said, number one, please hear the stories. And then he said one more thing.
Have them put themselves in our shoes. You're sitting there living the same life that your people have lived for thousands of years. And this new group of people comes in and it's like, we don't like how you guys are living. And we're going to take your kids, we're going to move them 100, 200, 300 miles away, and they can't speak your guys' language anymore. We're going to cut their hair, which is part of our culture, and they can't practice anything they've done before. We're going to make you do things the way we want you to do them. Imagine today if that happened in America where we had somebody come in and do that to their children and ask them if they'd still be okay with it. They won't be.
And both Michael Finley and Craig Bill told me they're certain that unmarked graves will be discovered in Washington, too. Whether the numbers are the same magnitude as Canada is harder to say. There's definitely more to come on this story, and I'm going to do a few more stories on this for sure in the near term. A detailed report's coming out tomorrow from the Kamloops Band with more details about the 215 graves they've identified up there. For the Secretary of Interior, it's unclear what's going on with that report. I don't think any steps have been taken here yet, but the idea is to have a final report by April of 2022. So there's much more to come. This is one of those things where, we're good at pointing out genocides in other parts of the world.
That's right.
But here at home, and I love America unconditionally. I'm glad every day I'm grateful my immigrant parents chose this country to come and settle. But there's stuff like this that we need to kind of daylight. Otherwise, we're going to be just mired in the same problems we've had for more than a century.
There was that arrogance that our way of life is superior to yours, and by God, we're going to impose it on you.
Yeah, and we're headed for a reckoning, and it's the sooner we get into the truthful part of it, the happier or the more healing will happen.
Felix, thank you. All Felix's features at mynorthwest.com. Mayor Durkin has sent her Equitable Initiative Task Force's spending plan to the City Council. There's also some blowback from the Office of Police Accountability report on those SPD officers who ended up at the Washington, D.C. insurrection, January 6th. And we have updates on the Seattle Police Department's crowd control legislation. Let's go to KIRO's Hannah Scott with the City Hall wrap-up. Hannah?
Good morning, Dave. Yeah, so this is, we'll start off with Mayor Durkin transmitting her legislation from the Equitable Communities Task Force. Now, you'll remember back when we started talking about participatory budgeting and the $100 million that the mayor had promised that would go to BIPOC communities and all of that. What happened was we had one group kind of over the King County Equity Now and various others who were working with the city council on that participatory budgeting plan. And then $30 million was going over to Mayor Durkin's Equitable Communities Task Force, which is folks who live in these communities who've worked really diligently for a very long time to come up with some very specific first kind of pillars that they want to invest in. And then they've recently drilled down. This latest report that they had that they transmitted to the city council really drills down on that to get very specific. Basically, this is about generational wealth, housing, health, education. Those are the areas that we're going to see investments in should this all go down the way that they've proposed it. I think there's $4.5 million. That's the highest amount allocated to one specific area. That is to help with home ownership. At any rate, the mayor says this is an important part of what comes next for these communities. And she said the task force has spent a very long time, hundreds of hours, coming up with these proposals.
And they really put every city department through its paces to figure out what was already being done, where the gaps were, and what they thought was most important. And one of the most important things about this is it is all community-led. And this is what the task force decided they wanted the priorities to be.
And she tells Amari Salisbury with Converge Media that this is really just the beginning.
This is just the first down payment. I still believe we need to do this type of investment over at least 10 years. This will work together with the amounts for participatory budgeting and the strategic investment fund. But together, those things are all trying to get us to a place where we have more resilient communities, and we've invested in things like affordable housing, education, employment opportunities that really lead to safer communities.
So again, over on the city council side, they've got their own kind of program that they've been working with that group who's going to be doing the participatory budgeting and did all the research. So the mayor was asked whether we're going to see kind of some of this very public divisiveness that we've seen on certain issues in the past.
Have you guys been talking? Have people been talking with council and things like that so they kind of know what's on its way over, or is this going to be...
We've been talking to them, but most importantly, this really is community-based. So members of the task force have been meeting with each of the city council members and explaining why they reached what they reached. And, you know, we're required to transmit, but this is their work product, and I stand very solidly behind it.
So she transmitted that legislation over to city council, and they'll start working on that coming up. I think starting next week is when they'll.
Can you tell us what the secret is? I mean, what we will be doing this time different than what we've tried to do before to solve these same problems?
Well, none of this is a done deal. But again, what you're doing here is you're hearing, and you're the mayor, as she kept trying to point out right there, is that she's not involved really a lot with this process. Mm-hmm. These are communities of color who spent hundreds of hours, weeks and weeks, figuring out where the gaps are in what the city currently does through its various departments, and saying, okay, here's where we need to inject this money. Here's how we need to do this. And again, what we've heard from the beginning when we started talking about the end of systemic racism during, over a year ago when the CHOP was there and the protests were happening, was we know what we need in our communities. Listen to us. That's what's different.
Right.
That's who's saying.
But I'm saying, so what does that turn out to be?
Well, we don't know yet. I can again. So you've got the 4 pillars. They've got a very long list that is part of this that they just transmitted over that just finds those gaps. So it's again. You've got money that's going to make sure that there's more people of color who become healthcare workers. There's healthcare money to help those who need actual healthcare. There's again the largest pot of money in this proposal is close to $5 million from that $30 million is going to help advance home ownership for people in the communities. So there's, I think, 40 or so different things there.
And we'll do it by just writing checks to people or setting up a bank?
Yeah, this is $30 million that was already allocated. So, I don't know exactly what that looks like. So people would
apply for a check to help them buy a home from this money?
Yes, it would be part of a program that would be administered through a certain city department. Again, so there's going to have to be RFPs for this. They're basically, this task force came out with what it is they want. The end result, right? And then the city will work through its various departments to implement these things.
Okay, what's the police department update?
So a couple of things. One, remember, we've had that crowd control ordinance that had passed last year, right kind of in the middle of the protest. The city council very upset with the flashbangs, the tear gas, all of those things that were going on. And they very quickly passed a complete and total ban on all of those things. So SPD wasn't going to be able to use them. That got some pushback, though, from the Justice Department and the federal judge overseeing the consent decree because it wasn't in line with the consent decree. And there are those occasions, especially with SWAT and hostage situations, and on occasion during certain demonstrations where you need to have that power. So that had a restraining order put up against it. And since then, the city council has been working with the federal monitor, kind of listening to what the judge had to say and trying to find the best possible version of their crowd control proposal that they can get passed. So that's what they've done. They had introduced it a few weeks ago. Yesterday, they finally advanced it out of committee with a couple of very minor actual amendments. Essentially what this does is it bans blast balls and 4 other very specific kind of weapons that I've really never seen in any protest that I've been to. And then it restricts, not bans, tear gas, flashbang grenades, pepper spray, and things like that. And it essentially says you cannot use these at all, period, in a demonstration. It has to be outside of a demonstration unless these certain specific things are met. You can use them. And it has to be that there's a threat to life like an immediate threat to life because of a violent protest or disturbance that's going on, there is no property protection here. They cannot use these things for protecting a property like we saw last year. And then also it has to be done by an officer who's been trained with these weapons in the last 12 months. He's got to make the order and he's got to have a tactical plan. So very specific ways that they'll have to be able to use this if this all gets passed and approved by the federal judge. What it also does is creates a specific right to file a lawsuit should the SPD violate that, and then they would be able to sue, even if it is them taking part in a violent protest. They'd be able to sue should SPD use some of these weapons out of policy.
KIRO's Hannah Scott. Thank you, Hannah.
You bet.
During the pandemic, domestic violence cases spiked, and just recently we've seen some heartbreaking local examples of that. And the community now is coming together to help. Let's go to KIRO Radio's Hannah Scott. Hannah?
Good morning, Dave. Yes, David Martin, he is the supervisor over at the King County Prosecutor's Domestic Violence Unit, and he says that really 2020 was an unprecedented year for domestic violence, especially when we're talking about serious cases.
Well, 2020 was a difficult year for domestic violence in King County. We had a surge of violent death in domestic violence cases. It had been many years since we had seen that number of domestic violence homicides in King County. The number was 18 in 2020, and it had been well over a decade since we had a similar number. So far in 2021, we are not at that same rate. Even though there are a number of deaths that are occurring in King County, we're not at the rate of 2020, which is a positive thing.
But it's not all good news.
Recent cases are difficult and hard, and anytime we have a domestic violence homicide, it impacts everybody in our unit and everybody in this community.
He's referencing some of the recent cases, including the young woman who was gunned down just last week at the Sam's Tavern there in Bellevue, suspected with her ex-husband going in there. That is someone who is taking part in an event that I'll tell you about here in a minute. Her loved ones and her family members are coming out to help with the community of domestic violence survivors. As far as 2020, though, and what's to blame for what we saw in this really unprecedented spike in domestic violence, it's not just necessarily the pandemic.
The things that are responsible for it, I think there's a number of factors that go into it. Economic uncertainty, the stress and strain that comes with the pandemic. But I think just practically speaking, people being home and together more often and increases in substance abuse and alcohol consumption contribute to it. We're going to spend a long time trying to unpack what has happened with COVID-19 and its impact on domestic violence. And that's why we partnered with the University of Washington and Harborview to help us understand that, at least specifically in regards to domestic violence protection orders and other things. So I can't give a certain answer to it, except to say that 2020 had a lot of really serious ramifications for domestic violence cases.
But he says it wasn't all bad news. There was actually some good progress for domestic violence survivors, specifically when it comes to strangulation and surviving such an attack.
Which is a part of the Refuse to Abuse 5K, is something that we saw the other day.
And that is something I will get to here momentarily. Here is what he said was the good news from the state legislature, I should point out.
Washington became the first state in the nation to pass forensic nurse examinations for strangulation cases. And basically what this means is victims of domestic violence strangulation will get better, more sophisticated medical care than they were getting previously, because now they'll have a forensic nurse who has an opportunity to see them when they go to the hospital. Usually this type of intervention was only reserved for cases of sexual assault. And now criminal domestic violence strangulation cases will have the same type of medical response. Washington's response with forensic nurse examiners is renowned nationally. So having these nurses now work on strangulation cases is a huge addition and benefit to victims of domestic violence.
Can I ask you about that? I mean, so you're saying now that in the past, if someone presented at the hospital and it looked like they had been strangled, nobody would follow up?
No, it's not this. It's not what he's saying. He's saying it's a very difficult kind of experience to go through, difficult crime. So these are forensic. They're called SANE nurses, forensic nurse examiners. They are very specifically trained, trauma-informed trained nurses who can do the various forensic works that's necessary, collecting the evidence, but also be compassionate and know how to deal. Right.
So
they're the same ones who do sexual assault.
Yeah, this is not just another injury. This is These are special. I get it. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, special circumstances. So that's what it's about. So all of this to say that David Martin and his team over there at the King County Prosecutor's Office, they partner with the Mariners right now, and they're doing the refuse. It's part of a refuse to abuse 5K that is with the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, where you can raise money. I'll have a lot of information on this later on mynorthwest.com, where you can get involved, sign up, donate, any of that kind of thing. But this is where we've got the young woman's loved ones who was just killed at Sam's Tavern, as well as several other local domestic violence survivors of those who've lost their lives in domestic violence cases, children of those who've lost their lives in domestic violence cases, who all take part of this. And Martin explains why.
Which is a part of the Refuse to Abuse 5K, is something that we saw the other day online. I think it's remarkable and grateful to the family and friends who would support and try and make prevention a priority, because the Refuse to Abuse 5K is something that's been going on for several years. And the King County Prosecutor's Office has had a team every year. And we've tried to raise money every year and have the biggest presence that we can. I think this year we have 49 people signed up. We're hoping to have more signed up by the time the event comes around. But it's one of the few things that happens in this community to bring a large cross-section of people together to really inspire and celebrate the prevention of domestic violence.
So they've got almost $6,000 raised. They're shooting for much higher, and it's a lot of different people and organizations take part in this. Again, I will have more on this. It's a really good way to help. It's really tremendous. I think that the loved ones, Anna's team is what their team is called in this. The loved ones of the woman who was just killed got involved that quickly. Yeah, because they're really close to a terrible thing that happened to their family. So yeah. And it's just really tough. And again, I think I told you this last week, but with domestic violence cases, all of the experts that I've talked to think that there are many people who did not report in 2020 what happened in their homes, and that we will see these numbers for 2020 go up quite dramatically. Our Radio's Hannah Scott. Thank you, Hannah. You bet.
Bedrooms and More has a mission: saving the world one home at a time. Flippable mattresses really last 3 times as long as one-sided beds. Plus, we design mattresses with replaceable components so you can enjoy a lifetime of comfort.
A 97-year-old World War II veteran wanted a Navy uniform to be closer to his lost shipmates, so one seamstress made it her mission to get it right. CBS's Steve Hartman has your daily dose of kindness, brought to you by Heritage Homecraft.
It was just another day at Causeway Alterations in Dunedin, Florida, when out of the blue, this elderly man walked in and asked if someone could make him a Navy uniform.
Why does a 97-year-old need a Navy uniform?
I love the uniform. I love my country, and I'm so happy I was able to serve.
This you?
It's me, yeah.
Joe Hall served in World War II as a Navy petty officer, first class.
Is that your ship?
Yeah.
He was on a destroyer escort, where he made some of the best friends of his life and lost a few too. They're all gone now, which is why Joe wanted that uniform, for when he sees them again. Susan Williams is the seamstress who waited on him.
I've made everything from underwear to wedding dresses. But to have a World War II veteran come in and say, I want to be buried in my uniform, it was like, this man is not leaving this store without me making this uniform, because it's the most important thing I'll ever do in my life. And it became a strong obsession of mine to make it right.
For the next 3 weeks, Susan poured herself into this project, binding every seam, satin-lined cuffs, buttonholes by hand. She spent at least 100 hours.
I love this.
And charged almost nothing.
Oh, beautiful.
Joe actually got his uniform a few months ago, but came back in to try it on again at our request. he hardly seemed bothered.
I feel like I'm back in the service.
In fact, even though he wanted this for his death, you get the sense that now it's what he lives for.
Look at that. Can't beat it, right?
Right.
I wanted to be with my friends, be part of them. And this uniform kind of brings them close to me, you know.
They say the suit makes the man, but not in this case. Joe Hall was a loyal friend 7 decades before he got these dress blues. He just needed someone to sew his heart to his sleeve for that long-awaited reunion.
You've done a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Steve Hartman, on the road in Dunedin, Florida.
Man, it's the simple gestures, isn't it? Wow.
What a story. What a story. Filling in again today for G. Scott is Aaron Mason, turns out to be a rabid hockey fan. And you saw the piece in the Times about the visitors who got a peek inside Climate Pledge Arena. Apparently it's going to be ready on time, and it sounds like you're pretty excited.
I am excited, and I gotta dial it back just a little bit, Dave. I grew up around rabid hockey fans. I'm sports adjacent mostly.
I see.
I enjoy watching sports. I enjoy the competition. I will frankly watch the championships of anything. Frog jumping, coin flipping, whatever it is. If it determines the best, I'm in. But this year, in anticipation for the Kraken, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get more into hockey. Let's see if I can give it a whirl and see if it sticks. And I got to tell you, it was a really great experience. I still don't know all the rules necessarily. I don't know all the player drama and who's what and who's good. But you just sort of start walking into that pool from the shallow end, realize, no, this is a fun, exciting thing. I remember going to games. Hockey games are electric. It's a good crowd, and so I'm really excited to sort of start at the ground floor here this year.
Have you bought the Kraken merchandise
yet? No.
You got the merch?
Not yet. I don't have the merch. I don't have the merch yet, but I will. I promise you. The merch looks good. Whoever did the graphic design on that stuff, I like.
You've been to a Thunderbirds game?
I'm here for it. Yes, actually, I have. It is.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
they throw stuff and everything.
I know. It's crazy.
The Zamboni is a thing.
Gotta love the Zamboni. Yeah. I mean, that's half the price of admission right there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for number one, it's just refreshing to see any kind of Seattle Public Works project come in on time like this. The inside looks quite impressive. I've only been, I've been downtown maybe like 3 times in the past year, but right. I walked by it, and the exterior looks impressive, and it's going to be state of the art. So I think that's great. Anything that gets people out again and excited is a fantastic thing.
And they say that the sound system is going to be good because
how is that even possible?
I don't know.
Well, they're going to have concerts there, so it's got to be.
It's got to be better than it was. That I will say. The Key Arena was the worst place to see a concert. It just everything sounded like mud. But it was the only venue.
Isn't that a universal arena experience? So is it? What I'm asking is it even physically possible in a space that big to have what could be accurately called a decent sound system?
Dave, I believe that the scientists can do it. If we can put a man on the moon.
If we can put a billionaire 62 miles up
into kind of outer space,
we should be able to get a decent sound system in an arena. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, Dave. We can do it. America, #1.
Yeah, okay. Well, other than that, did you watch the All-Star game?
You know, I was working. I was working one of my other jobs, so I caught glimpses of it. Baseball's fun.
Yeah.
I enjoy baseball. I just went to a Mariners game for the first time this past weekend with your producer, James.
The first time ever?
No, not ever. Since COVID. You know, the first time in
first post-COVID
2 years probably. And oh gosh, did it feel so good to get out there and see some baseball?
Yeah,
hang out with people.
Gotta ask you, there's apparently back to the All-Star games. There's apparently this huge controversy over their uniforms. Did you see them? People thought they were just ugly.
They're fine. What do you want? I mean,
I think they want people to go back to wearing their team uniforms. I think that's what the goal is.
I guess. I don't care. I mean, I don't care. Let's just we're there to have some
Play
fun.
ball.
Play ball. Put on some stars and stripes.
Not a fashion show.
What it is. Yeah.
I just hope it didn't destroy the Mariners' momentum, because there have been so many hopeful signs this season.
Yeah.
So many games. It was almost like at times I was almost going back to Refuse to Lose. You remember those days? Well, maybe you're too young for those days.
I do.
Yeah, you remember those days. And that was my only concern about the All-Star game happening when it did, in terms of the Mariners' timeline, because they were just on a roll.
Dave, the Mariners are like that guy you date, and he's really cool, and then he ghosts you from then on. That's what it's like to be a Mariners fan.
But then every year.
You're
going back
he's
to it.
really
Keep
cool,
doing it again. No, he's
then,
changed.
God.
This time is different.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep dating him because he keeps changing his profile online. Is that what it is?
Different catchers, different pitchers.
Yeah,
It'll work this time. Please.
Yes, I agree with that. Aaron Mason in for G, starting at 9 this morning on Cairo Radio. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Dave.
This is Seattle's Morning News. Dave Ross with Heather Bosch and Chris Sullivan. Let's talk about the future of aviation with a man who thinks the time has come for electric airplanes. His name is Roy Ganzarski. He's the CEO of Magni X. This idea is designed to fill a particular transportation niche. So tell me what your big idea is here, Roy.
Well, the idea is to provide transportation by air to what we call the middle mile for trips between 50 to 1,000 miles, and in fact, even shorter than that, 500 miles in range. Imagine here in Washington State, I have a daughter that goes to Wazoo, studies in Pullman. And if I want to go visit her with my family, I have to drive 45 minutes to SeaTac, get there an hour ahead of my flight, only to get on a 45-minute flight to arrive to Pullman. And for that pleasure, I will pay hundreds of dollars per person to do that. And so instead, we do like most Washingtonians do, and that is drive the 5 hours from the Seattle area to Pullman and 5 hours back. And with a car full of teenagers, that's not always the most exciting experience.
No.
And so the idea is, how do we change that paradigm that even trips within Washington State can be done by air in an affordable and, as importantly, clean fashion? And electric aviation is a solution for that. Being able to fly from any airport in Washington State. By the way, we have over 150 airports in the state, flying from any one of them to any one of them in less than 250 miles in range, doing it in an electric aircraft with less noise, complete zero emission, and 40% of the cost.
These would be smaller planes, though, right?
They will. It'll be 9, even 6 passenger, up to about 40 passengers max. So we're talking on the smaller size of what you would see at an airport. But that means that you don't have to stand in line for TSA, because these smaller airplanes do not require the full TSA lines as they do at the major airports. And it means you can use a lot more airports than you can today. Why go to SeaTac if all you're doing is flying a small plane to Pullman? Why not fly out of Boeing Field, out of Olympia, out of Bellingham, etc.?
How do you make money with only 9 passengers, though?
The airplane is significantly cheaper. So the fallacy of aviation is that the bigger the plane, the lower the cost per seat, which in today's world of internal combustion engines is true. And that's why you see the airlines and the manufacturers going to bigger and bigger planes. The problem is, the bigger and bigger the plane, the bigger the airport you have to fly in and out of to make any money, because you need about 70% full aircraft to break even. 70% of 100 people is much harder to get than 70% of 9 people. And so because the aircraft is smaller and the costs are 40 to 80% cheaper per hour to operate, you can make tremendous money flying with more options for more people.
Up to 80% cheaper per hour. Why does the choice of electricity as your propulsion system make such a huge difference?
There are 2 major elements. The first is the cost of fuel versus electricity. A 1.5-hour flight, for example, on a 9-passenger plane using internal combustion engines and fuel will cost about $424 for that 1.5-hour flight in fuel alone. It'll only cost $24 in electricity.
Wow.
So just there, you see a tremendous cut in costs. Now, the second thing is if you ever driven an electric car or you have a washing machine or mixer at home, electric motors, very little maintenance. And maintenance is a huge cost and downtime of aircraft. Take that away, and now you've reduced the cost even further.
So these would be then nonstop point-to-point flights, and you envision lots of them, right?
I envision lots of them, but I won't say that there will be tens of thousands of these things buzzing through the air. That's not the case. These will replace the many cars that drive, for example, for the weekend, Seattle to Chelan. There's an airport in Chelan, and yet we all drive there. There's an airport in Wenatchee. There's an airport in Walla Walla. There's an airport in Pullman. Why not enable tremendous transportation by air that's quick and efficient in the 1 to 2 hour max range and do it that way? Imagine not having to drive from Seattle to Olympia through the Tacoma traffic and being able to fly above it. I mean, what an amazing proposition that would be at the same price.
On the technology, now these have to be pretty robust batteries. Are these lithium batteries?
Right now, we're using lithium-ion batteries. They're the only real batteries that have been proven so far to be able to go in the air. But there's a lot of new battery technology coming out, lithium sulfur, lithium metal, solid state, and of course, hydrogen fuel cells. And so the beauty of an electric aircraft is that the source of energy can continue and get better and better and cleaner as time goes by, as opposed to fuel that will always remain dirty.
Okay, but what about safety? Boeing had their experience with the lithium battery, having to put it into a containment vessel. You had a battery catch fire, I know, at one of your facilities and burned an adjacent plane. I mean, it was on the ground. But, I mean, now that the entire plane is dependent on that battery, how do you make sure it's safe?
The same way we make sure fuel is safe. You know, if you're an alien and you arrived on planet Earth and you asked, how do you guys fly around? And the answer was, well, we put you in a small tube filled with one of the most combustible and explosive liquids known to man. And then, by the way, we light it so that you get thrust. You know, an alien would quickly turn around and go away. And so the issue of batteries, yes, in the very early days with Boeing and the 787, there were some fires. It was one of those early learnings. And we learned as an industry, how do you pack battery cells to maintain safety? No different than today. No one questions how it is that we fly with fuel all over the plane. It's just a matter of working with the FAA to identify and then prove that the batteries we use are safe, reliable, and good for flight. And so, of course, no one will ever get on a plane before the FAA has blessed it and said, we've gone through all the trials, all the tribulations, and this is now as safe as it can be.
So do you have a prototype?
Yes, we're actually building the first Alice aircraft right now. It's being built up in Arlington, Washington. It's a 9-passenger all-electric aircraft. We're going to fly it later this year. And from a propulsion perspective, we've been flying electric aircraft since December of 2019. Our first aircraft was together with Harbour Air, a seaplane airline out of Vancouver, Canada. We've been flying one of their Beavers, all electric, for over a year now. In fact, as late as yesterday morning, it was flying and is doing tremendous. It's quieter, significantly quieter, so the communities around it can barely hear it. It produces zero emissions, and it flies the missions that Harbour Air needs to fly. And so from that perspective, it's a tremendous success.
And you achieve the same speeds as with regular aircraft?
The exact same speeds. In fact, one of the nice things about electric propulsion is that you're not impacted by high or hot days. And so, for example, where traditional engines have a problem going into the mountains or taking off at high temperatures, because, of course, you need air to create that explosion in the internal combustion engine that creates the thrust.
Right.
And when air is hot or high, it becomes less dense, and so you get less power. Our electric motors don't need any air. And so it doesn't matter if you're at sea level or up at flying around Mount Rainier, you get the same thrust out of the propulsion as you would at sea level.
Roy Ganzarski is the CEO of Magni X. They're developing the electric airplane. Roy, thanks. It's been a delight to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Dave Ross.
And I'm Colleen O'Brien. Thanks for listening to Seattle's Morning News.
You can hear us live every morning on 97.3 FM or subscribe to this podcast and you'll never miss the show.